A little tree in the big woods. Once upon a time, in a forest somewhere up north, there grew a young birch tree, whom all the other trees called Little Tree. Little Tree spent his days surrounded by many other trees. Rays of sunshine rested on his branches, and he breathed fresh, cool air through his leaves, and drank clean, refreshing rainwater through his roots. Every year he dropped his seeds on the ground for the deer and rabbits to eat, and little chickadees built their nests among his branches. Little Tree loved feeding the animals, but his most important job was to watch over the forest. Being a birch tree, his papery white bark was covered in big black eyes. Day and night he watched over the forest. On a few occasions, a lost human would come wandering by. It was all up to the birch trees to guide the human to safety again. This was truly Little Tree's most important job, for deep in the forest was no place for humans. One day, a great, powerful storm shook the earth. Little Tree heard loud crashes, and great dark clouds came up from the ground into the sky. This was not like any other storm he had ever seen. Clouds and thunder coming straight out of the earth. Dust filled the sky, making everything look hazy and orange. And soon all the trees were coated in dust too. Little Tree, being surrounded by taller trees, could not see so far in the distance. Even if he was full-grown, he would still be much shorter, as birch trees do not grow so tall as the pines that tower over him. The terrible sounds grew closer, so close his very roots were shaking in the earth. The deer and rabbits scattered, and the chickadees flew away as quickly as they could. He closed his eyes, scared of what he might see. As the day wore on, the noise faded and all became still again. Little Tree opened his eyes slowly, one at a time. The sun was setting, and all night long he stayed awake, watching, waiting, but only silence, and very, very dark, with barely a soft glow from the moon. The next morning brought dewdrops, but not the usual pleasant and refreshing dewdrops. With all the dust from the day before, everything in the forest was covered in a sticky mud. Little Tree's leaves were now dirty, and his once clean white bark was a dusty brown. He peered through the trunks between the taller trees and saw a big empty space where forest used to be. What happened? Where did all the trees go? Little Tree wondered. What happened next was worse. More noise, more dust, a fiery glow with black smoke billowing into the sky. The animals still did not return, and Little Tree couldn't blame them. He would run away too if he could. The air was hard to breathe, and now there was a black mixed with the mud on his white bark. The earth-shaking clatter was becoming something normal. Every day it was the same thing. He could see things happening in the cleared space, and of course the presence of large orange-colored beasts was hard to ignore. These strange animals let out awful noises all day long, and breathed out clouds of foul, stinky breath. Little Tree felt sick, and the air burned his leaves. The beasts wandered back and forth, seeming to be lost. Little Tree tried to show them the way out of the forest, far, far away. But the beasts wouldn't listen. They just kept going back and forth, leaving their sour air behind them. Days passed by, and the animals still would not return. Little Tree missed the deer and rabbits. The forest was not the same without them. Rain fell and washed some of the black and brown off of his bark. He shook his branches, flinging the mud off his leaves. Then one day it was quiet. Finally, maybe the beasts had found their way home. Little Tree saw through the trees a field of nothing but dirt. Those beasts ate everything, but at least they were gone now. After time, the deer and rabbits came back to graze. The chickadees returned to their abandoned nests. This made Little Tree very happy. He watched in wonder as nearly every day a thick rainstorm would travel the length of the empty space. Days turned into weeks, and little plants began to grow in the space. The thick little rainstorms came so often, though, that a small pool began to form in a lower spot in the ground, close to where Little Tree stood. Some days it would rain so hard that a stream began to form, cutting its way through the dirt, flowing into the pool. He would often stare into the pool, but nothing seemed to live there, and as time passed, the weeds that were growing there choked and died. He did not like that water. It did not taste good to his roots. The animals would not drink it either. The new small plants in the space grew taller. Very strange-looking plants, unlike any he'd ever seen. They stood tall and slender and very green. They were not trees, but whatever they were better than dirt. Life seemed to be returning to normal. Well, as normal as it could be, considering all that had happened. Then came a bird, a giant, loud monster of a bird. The bird flew over the strange new plants, back and forth, spraying clouds of mist over everything. A smelly, burning mist that made all the trees around choke and cough. Once again, the animals fled. Little Tree's eyes watered. As quick as it had come, the monster bird left, leaving its bitter stench in the air. Little Tree hoped that was the last of the curious beasts, the flying and the roaming. He wished for the air to be clean and refreshing again, and that the icky pool of dead plants would just disappear. Would life in the forest ever be normal again? Only time will tell. Little Tree grew up in a forest by a field. He spent his days soaking up the warm sunshine through his leaves, making the best he could of the not-so-fresh air and the not-so-sweet water. Every year the beasts would return, and he would try again to send them away. He was a good birch tree, faithfully keeping watch over the forest day and night. The end.